video podcast. Congratulations. What a great strategy that is to get your name in front of more people. And if you are someone who is considering starting a video podcast, this live stream is for you. I'm going to break down how to publish a video podcast without recording on Zoom or editing interviews. Editing interviews can be a very time consuming thing. And also, recording on Zoom can also cost money. So, I'm going to break down how you can save money, save time, and also save, I really think, energy. It's like frustration and it all consuming thoughts about like, what do I do? And I'm just calling it energy, right? Saving energy around this. So Cheryl Plouffe here, video strategist, and we are going to break this down. As of right now, as I do this video, we have done 14 video podcasts under my new content marketing strategy. And the idea here is that a video podcast is a way for you and for me to, build our network, to get ourselves in front of our different audiences. In fact, the audiences of our guests who come on the show. And actually did a video, I'll link to it here in the cards if you're watching on YouTube, where I talk about how to 2 to 3x the video views on your podcast organically. So I'll link that in the cards. But the idea here is that a video podcast can be a very powerful medium for you to get your message out there and to be able to do it in a really elegant way that is advantageous to everyone. It's a win-win situation. So why video podcast as opposed to just simply an audio podcast? Well, I know for me, I'm a big fan of repurposing content. So I like the idea of starting with a video and then repurposing to audio because it gives you more options. It gives you more flexibility to create more content that's dynamic. There's nothing wrong with audio podcasts. Many people have created very popular audio podcasts, and that's awesome. But especially for me as a video strategist and as a former TV broadcaster, really, I'm all about the video. So for me, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe it does for you too. And what I see out there, and maybe you can relate to this, and I'd love to know, if you are in the chat or if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook on my page, my Facebook group, Cash In on Camera, LinkedIn, or Twitter, and have questions since this is live, we can discuss. So write your comments in the chat and I'll do my best to address them as I do this live, or at the very least, I'll come back and answer your questions afterwards. So the reason that a video podcast can be awesome is because obviously it's a way to create content that's really elegant and it's a win-win situation. The problem is that, and what I have seen a lot of people do that I speak to in calls, is that they're recording the video podcast in advance. So they're not doing it live. What they're doing is they're recording, let's say, a Zoom meeting, and then they're taking that, and then they have to go through a whole process of post-production, meaning production post recording, and then alter that so that they can then publish it onto those platforms. And so it's not that it's not possible. Of course, you can do that. It's the problem is that it's not a very efficient way of doing it. And that's what we're really going to talk about today. So let's start by just breaking this down. And what I'm just going to do here is show you, hang on a second here. I'm just bringing this up. So the first thing that we have to consider is that with a video podcast, in terms of time savings, so let's just start with time. A video podcast will be able to save you a lot of time for a variety of different reasons. And it's funny because as I was preparing for this live stream, I was speaking with my husband, and he is also a longtime TV broadcaster, now retired. And we had a good conversation about this. And he brought up a few really good points that I'm also going to share with you on this stream today. But from a time saving perspective, and I'm going to look at this from the viewpoint of an amateur editor, an amateur content creator, and then perhaps a more intermediate content creator. Okay. So let's say you're new at this and you are looking for a better way. You don't really have a lot of editing experience. You're willing to do it, but you're at the beginning levels of this skill set or developing this skill set. You're going to have to, and we're going to do this under the premise of, let's say, a 30-minute interview. So you're doing a video podcast, you're interviewing someone, let's say on Zoom, for example, for 30 minutes, just as a round number. And you conduct the interview, and that's great. Well, now as someone who has to go through that footage, if the interview itself is 30 minutes, you're going to have to go through the entire interview at the very bare minimum in order to review everything that was said in the content, in the interview, in order to then determine where are the sound bites and what are the portions of that interview that I want to keep. What is going to end up on the editing floor and on the editing room floor, and what am I going to keep? Well, you're going to have to go through that 30-minute interview no matter what in order to review everything that was said. Not to mention the fact that you're then going to have to actually go through the process of editing, which is, taking notes. So for example, you might need to take notes on the interview about where the in point and out point are of each of the clips that you want to keep, the sound bites that you want to keep. Well, if you're doing that over the course of a 30-minute interview, you can imagine that you're taking notes, you're taking notes, you're taking notes. All of that takes time. And the more skilled you are means that you're spending less time doing it. You get faster at it. But it doesn't mean that you're ever going to get to a point, even if you're super skilled. It does take time to go through an interview of that nature and edit it down. So I broke this down. Randy and I were talking about this, and he said, well, if you have to go through all the footage and you're a beginner or an amateur, it's not unreasonable to think that it could take upwards of 3+ hours to do one episode, depending on your skill level. And even if as a beginner, you're able to go through that 30-minute interview, select your sound bites, make your notes, go into the editing software, add in those visual elements like adding in your lower third, adding in, so just like how I added this element that I'm putting on the screen here, that's a lower third. Well, you've got to create that lower third. You've got to add it into the onto the video. You might also want to add visual elements like B-roll footage, meaning it could be video footage or even photos that you lay on top of the video at specific areas of the interview where it pertains to what's being said. So you see this a lot in news stories when you're watching a news report where you hear the voice, people are talking in the background, but something is laid over top, right? That's B-roll. You have to add all of that in post-production while you're editing. You also might want to use music. So now you have to source the music. You've got to find it. You're going to have to bring that into your editing software, and then you're going to have to lay that down as a music bed, and then you have to adjust the volume. You might even want to do noise cancellation and different things like that, compress it. You want to add graphics. So for example, this thing that I just added on the screen right now is a graphic that I created and had to add in here. But in post-production, you're having to do all of those things, aside from the fact you have to have the skill set to do it. But from a time-saving perspective, since that's what we're talking about right now, is how do we, save time? Well, graphics, adding video, music, B-roll, lower thirds, going through the 30-minute interview, identifying, making notes, looking at the sound bites, like, time codes and all of that. It's not unrealistic to think that for a beginner, it could possibly take 3+ hours. Yes, it could take less. It could take more. In fact, I have heard of people who have been doing it this way, and I have heard stories of people where it's taking 6+ hours to make one episode. Again, it depends on how in depth you're getting, but I'm just trying to give a framework here of why it can really be something to consider to find a better way. So if you are doing, let's say, even one episode of your video podcast per week, it could be 3 hours out of your work week just to do the episode, or maybe 2 or maybe 4, depending on your skill level. If you're intermediate, okay, yeah, maybe it's 1 hour to 2 hours, maybe to 3 hours, right? The point being that it can take a lot of time. It can take a lot of time to edit content, depending on your skill level. So you want to really be thinking about, and this is something that Randy and I talked about. I said, if it's a 30-minute interview and you're cutting it down to, say, a 10-minute interview. So you interview for 30, but you want your video podcast episode to be 10 minutes in length. What you're really doing when you go through the 30 minutes is you're looking for the strongest clips, right? You're looking for the ones that you're going to keep. What are the strongest clips out of this 30-minute interview? If you're saying taking a 30-minute interview and you're cutting it down to, say, 20 minutes, then you're looking really for what to extract. You're looking for what are the weakest clips in that 30 minutes to bring it down to 20. Regardless of whether you're looking for the weakest clips or the strongest clips in that 30 minutes, it takes time. It takes time to go through and edit that content. Okay. So it's just something that, you really want to be thinking about in terms of publishing this without recording on Zoom. And listen, I'm a fan of Zoom, by the way. I have some of my highest performing videos on my YouTube channel are about Zoom. My 1 million viewed video is about Zoom. Many of my videos that have, 250,000, video views are about Zoom. I'm a fan of it. Don't get me wrong. I love it. It's great. But I do think that if you're producing a show, there is a better way. I think there's a time and place for the Zoom. I use it all the time for, um, different things that I do. But so, for example, like virtual video production, like one of my products, one of the things, the services that I offer is that I create content and I create content plans and implement them for 6 and 7 figure businesses. Well, when I'm doing those interviews virtually, I do use Zoom. Right? So there is a time and a place for it. But from a video podcast production perspective, I think there's a better way, which I'm going to be sharing with you in this video. Okay. So time saving, it is important to really be thinking about what is the value of your time and is it the best option for you to be, again, recording these on Zoom, for example, only to be left with spending even more time afterwards in post-production, making something of that, say, 30-minute interview. So that's thing one. That's thing one consideration. The second one is money. Who doesn't want to save money? Okay, so from a money saving perspective, we have to be thinking about a few different things. And if we are still using our Zoom example of I'm doing my video podcast, but I'm pre-recording it, right? I'm interviewing someone on Zoom. What happens is you're left with having to have that Zoom interview stored somewhere. And on Zoom, you have two choices. You can save it to the cloud or you can save it to your computer. And both of them require some investment of money. So for example, with Zoom, extra cloud storage is about $40 a month for extra cloud storage. I can't remember the exact amount of cloud storage right now, but enough to be able to store interviews. Even if you're doing interviews, let's say one video podcast episode per week, or if you're doing even more, like we're at about between, say, 2-ish episodes per week on average right now. But my plan is to ramp up to 3 to maybe even 5 and do kind of a John Lee Dumas and start interviewing, because we have really streamlined processes in the background that allow me now to do my best work, which is to interview and have a lot of my stuff automated in the background. But I could be doing, 3 to 5 interviews, and we're ramping up to that. If you're doing, let's say, 1, 2 interviews per week, you have to have storage. If it's a 30-minute interview, you likely will not have enough storage in your normal Zoom Pro plan. So it can cost money to get that extra cloud storage. Now, if the other version would be to save that to your computer. Well, if video files are large, you might need and likely would need, I have 2 of them here, in fact I'll show you, hard drives, external hard drives. And I don't know the going rate of a hard drive right now, but these are by Seagate. I've got a couple of them hanging around here. Is it fair to say that these are about $90 plus to 120-ish? Yeah, it is. These are not exactly cheap, but they're awesome. You're going to need a place to store that. Not to mention the fact that if you're going to be going this route of pre-recording and then having to do post-production, you're going to need editing software. I am a fan. I have been using Camtasia for years, and I believe that software is around that 300 plus range, and that's on the low end for an editing software. A lot of people are using different ones, some with like Adobe, or they're doing Premiere, or they're doing Final Cut Pro, all these different ones. Like there's Filmora as another one but I've been using Camtasia for my entire career, so as a marketer. So I love it. But it costs money, right? To have an editing software that you're now going to need in order to edit the videos. Well, so it can start to, add up to costing you, a decent investment if you're going to be doing it this way, not to mention the time savings that we've already talked about. So, from a money saving perspective, when you do it in a more efficient way, like I'm going to share with you today, you can really be saving yourself some money. And the third thing to consider is energy savings. It was funny when I was putting this together, I thought, well, what do I call this? Is it stress saving? I just called it energy saving, right? It's like saving energy, saving frustration, saving stress around a lot of the decisions that need to be made once you are, if you are producing this in a pre-recorded manner and needing to do post-production. And that is that when you do Zoom, for example, after you conduct the interview and you save it to the cloud or to your external hard drive on your computer, when you access those recordings, you're left with a lot of different choices about, do I want to work with the gallery view? Do I want to work with the speaker view? There's about 6 different options for the different kinds of recordings. They have to be set up in advance in the settings section of Zoom in order to determine which ones you're even going to record in the first place. And I've heard of cases where people don't go into the innards of Zoom to set up what they want to record, and then they do the Zoom interview, come back to find that the thing that they wanted isn't there. But let's presume you do go in, you set up those settings properly, which will take some time to look through and figure that out. But you're conducting the Zoom interview, and now you have to go back and make decisions. That takes energy. It could be stressful. You don't know what you're doing. You're like, I don't know. Do I need the gallery view or the speaker view? So it's a way to alleviate all that. The other thing that is interesting is that guests who come on your show, you interview them, they feel, especially those who are pretty savvy and are speakers and who do this maybe on a more regular basis, they're more comfortable when they know that they're not going to be taken out of context. And a lot of seasoned speakers like the live format versus the pre-recorded format because of that, because they can't be taken out of context. They're not at the mercy of an editor who they might know or don't know you as well, and they don't know your level of skill. Maybe you feel apprehensive about editing their interviews in the first place because you're not confident about your own skill. So it's something to think about from the perspective of your guests. They're not at the mercy of you, the editor. And also, um, you know, the editor is not going to have to work at not having, what am I looking at? Not speaking of editor, work not having over you. I don't even know what my own note was there. That's so funny. But I think it's a typo, and I'm looking at my notes here. What am I talking about? Work not over you. It's publishing right away. That's it. So, you want to really be thinking about the content that you're creating from the perspective of the guest too. Yes, it is about you and you're the editor and you're the creator, but your guests also are going to have an experience when they come on your show. So from an energy saving perspective, they're not at your mercy. And so that's why I believe it's important to be thinking about video production, video podcast production without recording content in advance and without editing. It saves you time. It also saves you money, and it also saves you energy. So, with that, what is the solution? Well, the solution is to do something that some of you might be a bit apprehensive to do, but I'm here to tell you that you can absolutely do this. And that is to go live. That's what I'm doing here. I'm going live. And so all these elements that I'm showing you on the screen right now, I'm just clicking that with my mouse. I'm just going click. I'm going to show you this graphic and then I'm going to hide it. I'm going to put this on the screen and then hide it. I'm just clicking this with my mouse. And what's cool about it is that when you move away from this idea of I've got to record everything on Zoom and I've got to edit it and I've got to go through all of that process, you can actually create your show on the fly in the moment, live. Right now, we're going live to all of, a whole bunch of my platforms simultaneously at the same time because we use Restream, right? We use Restream along with some other tools, but Restream is what allows us to create our video podcast in this manner and to be able to make and produce the show without having to do editing and post-production and all that craziness. Your guests also, when you do this, are going to they're also going to appreciate the fact that the content gets out immediately. Right now, if this was a podcast interview that I'm conducting, you can see many examples of them on my platforms of the 14 or so that we've done to this point, is that content is out immediately and your guest isn't having to hunt around or wait around for that content to get out there. They're excited. They're on your show and they kind of want to get out there and start sharing it and promoting it. And they can do so immediately. What another thing is that's amazing about going live and using a tool like Restream is that you can use Restream pairs, and that takes it to a whole other level. So let me explain. With Restream pairs, it is a feature within Restream that allows your guest to broadcast your live stream to their platforms in real time simultaneously on up to 30 platforms of their choice. It's another level. I did a whole video on that. I'll link to it here in the cards so you can go back and watch exactly how we produce our podcast, and gives you really a sense of some of the emails and how we set that up with our guests. So I'll link that in the cards. And they're going to love you for this, because now you have done something special for them and that they have content that they can share with their audience. So it's I love it. I think this feature in and of itself, Restream and Restream pairs, which is free to your guests, by the way. You have to have a certain plan, but trust me, it's, I believe, way more economical, like certainly the way that we're doing it with our Restream tool and a few other tools that we use. We're sitting at about maybe, under $100 a month, to produce this video podcast. And what's cool about that, especially for those of you who have aspirations to maybe do multiple interviews in a week and really multiply your results online, you can do so much with a very minimal investment. Okay. And so I would prefer to see you doing something like what we're doing, using Restream and using Restream pairs and so many advantages around that, to then spending even just like the $40 a month just on the Zoom cloud storage, right? And then got to get the editing software. You got to get the editing software and then things like that. So I would prefer to be doing it this way. It makes a lot more sense and it's scalable. Even if at the beginning you're doing one interview per week and you're doing kind of like how we're doing and ramping up, you can do 7 podcast interviews per week if you wanted to. There's no limit to what is possible. Plus, you're reaching all of those platforms at the same time. We haven't even mentioned, from a time saving perspective, all of the uploading that has to happen afterwards. We've just talked about it from a recording and editing perspective today. Now, once you complete that edit, you've got to download it, right? You got to download it and or export it to your computer. Now you've got to go to LinkedIn and upload, YouTube and upload, Facebook and upload, groups and upload, and onward and onward. If you do that, obviously it takes time. If you have a VA who's doing that, you have to pay them to do it. So it just, the economy of this just makes a lot of sense. So going live is a great solution to your video podcast production strategy, and looking at tools like Restream allows you now to be the host and to have not only one guest, but you can have up to 9 guests on your show. You can do panels. You could also do summits this way. And all of that content is set up to go and stream simultaneously to as many platforms of your choosing as you'd like. Plus, with Restream Pairs, those guests, let's say you have 2 or 9 guests on your panel or summit or video podcast, and you're interviewing them and you're having this conversation. If all those 9 people were to set up their own Restream Pairs sharing or broadcasting, it's not really sharing, they're broadcasting in real time to their platforms. Think about how many people your message is reaching. Plus, they get content on their platforms, and it's a win-win. So that's why I believe the solution is to look at something like this, where you say, I'm going to, instead of pre-recording on Zoom, downloading, editing, uploading, all of that business, all that post-production, and all of that scheduling and publishing to the social platforms, it's better to think about actually just doing it in real time like this, And so huge advantages to doing it in this manner. And the thing that I would encourage you to think about is just at least starting your free Restream account. So if you go to right there, restream.io/join/CIOC, which stands for Cash In on Camera, you can start your free account. So what's the harm? Try it out. Start your free account. If you're already doing a video podcast, then use this platform, try it with the big 3 to 5 of your next guests who are scheduled for your show, and use Restream to produce your show. If you are someone who's aspiring to launch your podcast, your video podcast, then you can get this platform, get your account, try it for free. And what I do is I love to support my community in my Facebook group, in the Cash In on Camera Facebook group. So if you are someone who is not even doing it yet, by all means, get Restream, jump into the Facebook group. Both are free. And you can ask me questions. Ask questions in that group, and I'd be happy to jump in and help support you and help you to find a better way to produce this content, to produce your show so that you can benefit, and so can your audience. You get to build your network, you're creating content, you're able to build content, but also really build relationships, right? You can also generate leads. Your guests might even become leads. Like, there's so many advantages to having your own show and to having your platform really built out for you. So on that note, we're just approaching the 30-minute mark here on this live stream. And I just want to make sure, hi, Mina, nice to see you. Great to see you. Okay, great. If you have questions, please, if you're watching the replay, go in and ask, and I would be happy to jump into those areas, be it LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever, and to be able to support you. So really give some serious consideration to Restream. Make sure that you are, thinking about, how am I producing this video podcast? How am I actually going to do this in the most efficient way possible? Because my time, my money and my energy are worth their weight in gold. And you, as the entrepreneur, you, as the business owner, need to protect those valuable assets to the greatest extent possible. Thank you so much for being here with me for 30 minutes. Let's work together. And I can't wait to see you in the comments, and I'll be sure to support you in any way I can. Thank you so much for listening today, and I'll see you soon.